Chapter 501 The Mysterious Important Figure. "Oh, it's nothing. It's just a balloon," Willow said as she quickly threw it into the trash. She was embarrassed that someone had discovered a condom, proof of the intimate acts she and Caspian got up to. Chuckling, Zoey remarked, "Willow, that looked like a..." Before Zoey could finish her sentence, Willow put her hand over Zoey's mouth and said, "Hush! Stop talking. Just go to sleep." How mortifying it would be if word got out about this. The next day, all of Southlake City was on high alert. Desmond, the commander of Southlake City, knew that Caspian was coming. He had to get everything ready. The roads that Caspian would take were all cordoned off, and the surrounding houses had been searched. All the occupants had been investigated too, just in case there were enemy spies hidden among them. Many snipers were also standing ready in the shadows. Their sole goal was to keep Caspian safe. So much had been done just for the sake of welcoming Caspian to Southlake City, and the people of the city were no fools. They could tell that a powerful figure would soon be arriving. Thus, they came out of their houses and waited behind the barricade that had been set up. They wanted to see who was coming. Willow and Zoey caught wind of it too, so they came to the streets to join in on the fun. Sylvia already got the news yesterday when Caspian informed her he was returning. However, she couldn't do anything about it. Her job was to stay by Willow's side and keep her safe. Even before Caspian's arrival, many of the city's residents were already waiting eagerly. Due to the unrest in recent days, the companies and businesses in Southlake City came to a standstill. Many people didn't have to go to work, so they gathered to see what the fuss was about. The barricades stretched on for many miles with fully armed soldiers standing guard. Precaution against an unexpected crisis. Snipers were also stationed on the rooftops of the towering buildings on both sides of the road for that very same reason. Caspian was riding a vehicle with the best security setup possible, but that was no reason for them to let their guards down. At such a crucial moment in time, they couldn't let anything happen to Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war. Willow and Zoey stood at the back of the crowd, and they could just barely see what was happening in front. Everyone was awaiting the arrival of the supposed powerful figure. Even the people from the various elite families in Southlake City had come over to join the fun. The Stewarts were here as well. In fact, they were right in front of Willow. Richard and Alicia stood with the Stewarts, while Nicholas and the other archers stood behind them. All of Southlake City is under high alert. Willow. Surely, it means that an important person is about to show up. "I wonder who's coming over," Zoey commented out of curiosity. "I have no idea. Could it be Caspian?" Willow exclaimed. She only made that guess because she was fairly certain that Caspian was the Diaturanian god of war. It was quite likely that he was the important figure who would soon be arriving in Southlake City. "You're right, that's possible," Zoey nodded fervently in agreement. However, many in the crowd eyed them strangely after overhearing their exchange. The Stewarts were also eyeing them in derision. "Is there something wrong with your brain, Willow? Did the explosion at Southlake Corporation mess up your brain too?" Alicia mocked. Since Willow was no longer a part of the Stewart family, Alicia couldn't be bothered to show her any respect. "What are you implying, Alicia? You'd better watch your mouth," Willow snapped. "Am I wrong? Why else would you be so delusional? How could your husband be the important figure who's coming to Southlake City today?" Alicia snorted. "That's right. I've never seen such a shameless person in my life. I can't believe you have the nerve to claim that your husband's a big shot. Aren't you afraid of becoming a laughingstock?" Alicia's mother remarked. "Oh please, Willow. Can't you be a little less deluded? If Caspian is a big shot, then I'm the king of Diaturan." "Ha ha ha," Richard guffawed. Their mockery embarrassed Willow. After all she did was make a guess on a whim. No one knew who was coming today. She didn't expect a casual conversation between her and Zoey to attract everyone's attention. Even if Caspian was the Diaturanian god of war, there was no guarantee that he would be the important figure coming over today. Willow now felt flustered and unconfident. What's with all this nonsense? So what if it's not Caspian? What does that have to do with you? We'll know the answer soon enough. Zoey shot back in vexation. She wasn't going to stand by and let them bully Willow. Ha ha ha. What are you expecting, huh? Why would the arrival of a guy like Caspian be treated with such importance? Richard retorted with a laugh. I'm certain it's Caspian. He's the only one worthy of such fanfare, Zoey declared. What happened to you, Zoey? Did you get knocked on the head, Or are you living in a fantasy world now after reading too many romance novels? Nicholas snorted. As he used to be one of Willow's suitors, he knew that her friend, Zoey, wrote novels. What a joke, Zoey. It's one thing for you to indulge in fantasies, but you shouldn't have led Willow astray too, Kate snapped. On the other hand, Marilyn wasn't quite as dismissive as the others. She had witnessed what Caspian was capable of before. But that being said, even if he did hold a position in the military, he couldn't be receiving such a ceremonial welcome, right? Don't be too smug. I shall see what you have to say if Caspian does turn out to be the one who's coming. Willow stood her ground and fired back. She had enough of their insults. Naturally, the crowd's words only became more scathing. You two must have lost your minds. Birds of a feather do indeed flock together. Willow, do you really think Caspian single-handedly organized your grand wedding ceremony? Don't forget that it was John Anderson who helped you guys. That's right. I have no idea why people keep saying that Caspian's a powerful guy. It's all a bunch of baloney. Ha ha ha. Well, what if I tell you I'm the king of Diatoren? Are any of you going to believe me? You two are going to be the ones who end up humiliating yourselves. The Stewarts, Richard, and even some of the surrounding onlookers mocked Willow and Zoey, thinking that they were both delusional. The two women weren't sure if Caspian would show up in the first place. Since they didn't have the confidence to back their claims, they didn't bother arguing with the crowd. In reality, Sylvia and Macy were certain Caspian was the one showing up later. But even if they came forward to back Willow up, it wouldn't make a difference. The crowd wouldn't believe them. It was better to wait in silence. The answer would be revealed soon enough. Chapter 502, Exposing Her. Sylvia knew that once Caspian showed up, the crowd would be flabbergasted. She looked forward to seeing their thunderstruck expressions, so she was willing to let them feel smug for the time being. Meanwhile, the scathing remarks kept coming from the crowd. Who would have expected the CEO of Southlake Corporation to lack even the most basic level of self-awareness? Who would come up with such a blatantly ridiculous boast? Did she go crazy after Southlake Corporation's building got destroyed? Is that why she's now hallucinating that her husband's some kind of big shot? Ha ha ha, stop. You're making me laugh until my sides hurt. Everyone knows her husband's just a loser. Willow and Zoey felt utterly humiliated. They wanted nothing more than to leave at once. Just then, a long convoy of vehicles began filling up the road that led into Southlake City. All the military vehicles were armed with artillery, and the long-awaited big shot was about to arrive. Everyone focused on the road as they eagerly waited for the person to show up. As the imposing military vehicles drove past, everyone became solemn and respectful. The armed soldiers on board were studying the crowd vigilantly, so no one dared to speak or try to move forward. They might die if they were mistaken for an enemy spy. Many tanks and military vehicles had shown up for Caspian and Willow's wedding. It had been a grand affair, certainly the grandest wedding in the history of Southlake City. And yet, the convoy today was many times larger than the one that day. All of the stern and dignified soldiers had piercing gazes. Everyone who saw this scene held their breath and focused intently on the display before them. It was their first time seeing something like this, and they couldn't contain their emotions. The convoy of vehicles was an incredibly long one, and the vehicles in the lead were merely clearing the way to ensure that the road was clear of danger. It was of the utmost importance for them to ensure Caspian's safety. If the enemy spies successfully assassinated him, Diatoren would lose their undefeated god of war. Not only that, but Caspian was also the chief commander for the war zone at South Aridlands. After seeing the procession of tanks and military vehicles, the crowd on both sides of the streets became incredibly curious about the identity of the big shot. Many of the city's residents had gathered by the side of the roads. They heard that a big shot was coming to Southlake City. Even Joey, the inspector general, was here with her subordinates. Everyone wanted to see the person for themselves. There was no denying that Caspian's impending arrival in Southlake City would stir up huge waves. Just then, a military vehicle appeared, one unlike the others that had passed by earlier. It was visibly more fortified than the others. Its outer shell was made out of the latest bulletproof material. It was flanked by several tanks. Clearly, the passenger had to be the important figure. Everyone held their breaths as they stared at the special military vehicle. They saw a burly man sitting in the back seat. He was wearing a military uniform and had a stern gaze. It was John, the senior general from South Eridlands. John had returned from his previous post at the sea. Now that the battle was about to begin, he couldn't stay on the warship any longer. He needed to return to land and supervise the battle. When John heard that Caspian was returning to Southlake City to oversee the battle, he rushed over to escort Caspian in person. As a military officer at South Eridlands, he was also one of Caspian's subordinates. Thus, it was his duty to accompany Caspian. He couldn't afford to shoulder the responsibility if anything untoward occurred. As a senior general himself, John's safety was also a priority. That was why the .mi literary vehicle he rode in was not an ordinary one either. Alas, the crowd didn't know that the most important figure had yet to come. When they saw John, they immediately assumed he was the big shot they were waiting for. After all, there were only a handful of senior generals in Diatoran. In an instant, the crowd began to make their comments. "I didn't expect it to be General Anderson. That explains the procession. Definitely, the war's about to start, and since a senior general is making his move, it's essential to ensure his safety. What were we waiting for anyway? We should have known it would be him. Who else would be escorted by so many military officers? I know, right? We all forgot about him. Why did we even bother trying to guess? We were so silly." The crowd seemed convinced that John was the big shot they had been waiting for. "What do you have to say now, Willow? You must be humiliated, right?" Alicia jeered after seeing John in the military vehicle. "Ha ha ha. If I recall correctly, someone claimed that her husband was the big shot who was about to arrive." "What a joke," Richard mocked. "You're delusional, Willow. Caspian's just a loser, and yet you think he's a general officer." "Ha ha ha," Alicia's mother cackled. "Willow, even though you're not my biological daughter, I'm still so disappointed in you. Did you get kicked in the head? I'd be so mortified if someone found out we're related." "You'd better not tell anyone that we know each other," Kate said. Kate had suffered plenty at Caspian's hands, and now that she finally got the opportunity to ridicule Willow, she was going to do it to her heart's content. Listening to the crowd's mockery, Willow's expression soured. She didn't know what to do. She finally realized she was merely creating fantasies for herself. Could it be true that she had been mistaken? Was Caspian not the Diateranian god of war after all? Was she just being delusional? Zoey wanted to defend Willow, but she didn't know what she could say to refute the crowd. Everyone had seen John in the military vehicle just now. It wasn't Caspian who came. Thus, Zoey couldn't say anything. Meanwhile, Sylvia, Macy, and the others said nothing either. Their job was merely to keep Willow safe. They weren't here to engage in a verbal spar with these people. However, they knew that since John had arrived, Caspian would be following soon after. That was also why they didn't stand up for Willow. After all, as the Diateranian god of war, why would Caspian show up at the start of the convoy? While he was certain Caspian was no loser, he couldn't possibly be someone as powerful as John. "Kate, no matter what, Willow is still our daughter." "Why are you mocking her?" Carl chided angrily. "She's your biological daughter, Carl, but she has cut off all ties with me. We're not related by blood anyway. Why can't I make a few comments about her?" Kate retorted as she rolled her eyes at Carl. In the past, she only treated Willow with more courtesy out of consideration for her position as the CEO of Southlake Corporation. But now that the company had been bombed, she had nothing to fear. "Stop with your nonsense," Carl growled. Chapter 503, Not Holding Back. Carl was vexed that Kate had exposed Willow's true parentage. Only the Sider members of the Stewart family knew that Willow wasn't Kate's biological daughter. The younger generation had no idea, and neither did those outside of the family. He was infuriated that Kate had said it right in front of everyone. "How is it nonsense? I'm telling the truth. Caspian has no respect for me. He even threatened me. Just because of that whole situation with his adoptive mother, he nearly wanted to kill me." Kate snapped, venting her displeasure with Caspian. Caspian's previous threats had successfully scared her into keeping her silence, but in the heat of the moment, she was now letting it slip. "Caspian threatened me, so I had to tell him Willow's identity. The two of them found out about it a long time ago, so there's no reason for us to keep it a secret anymore," Kate declared in a huff. The Stewarts and the surrounding onlookers heard every word Kate said. They were taken aback that Caspian had threatened Kate in the past, and they were shocked to find out that Willow wasn't Kate's biological daughter. On the other hand, Willow wasn't all that stunned. Caspian had already told her about this. That being said, she didn't expect Kate to announce it in public. "Kate, what happened between you and Caspian's adoptive mother? Why did he want to kill you?" Marilyn asked. She, too, was shocked by Kate's revelation. She had been threatened by Caspian before as well, and just the memory of that frightened her. "About that," Kate stammered. She didn't know how to explain what happened. Caspian wanted to kill her because she had indirectly caused his adoptive mother, Lilith's, death. Kate knew full well she was partly responsible, so she didn't feel like telling everyone about it. "Why aren't you answering me? Hurry up and tell me," Marilyn urged impatiently. Unwilling to tell the truth, Kate simply said, "It's all in the past now, Mom. Let's just drop it. Caspian won't forgive me if I tell you guys." Thunderstruck, the clueless crowd began to criticize Caspian. Is Caspian mad? How could he even think about killing his mother-in-law? That's an unforgivable crime. Who would have thought that a seemingly talented and capable man like him is secretly so ruthless? Carl couldn't take it anymore. He immediately snarled. "Kate, I dare you to tell them the whole truth. Tell them why Caspian wanted to kill you. Why aren't you saying it, huh? Tell them how his adoptive mother, Lilith, was killed because you kicked her out of the house." After putting up with Kate's denigration all these years, he finally couldn't take it anymore. Furthermore, Carl understood Caspian's personality. Caspian wasn't an unreasonable man. If he wanted to kill Kate, it had to be because Kate had made life difficult for Lilith and chased her out of the house. That led to her getting killed by hooligans. Carl knew the truth about what happened between Kate and Lilith. Even though he was rather spineless and useless most of the time, he still knew wrong from right. He wasn't going to stand back and let the crowd insult Caspian. True enough, once the crowd heard what Carl had to say, they were dumbstruck. They did not expect the sudden turn of events. It turned out that Kate was the one who mistreated Lilith. She was even connected to her death. "Carl, stop blabbering nonsense! How dare you make up stories about me?" Kate screeched. She was enraged by the fact that Carl was exposing the truth. No matter what happened, she was never going to admit that she did those things. "You know very well whether or not I'm telling the truth. Do you dare to swear on your life that your conscience is clear?" Carl shouted. Truth be told, Carl had never been truly in love with Kate to begin with. Even now, he still loved Willow's biological mother. And since they had already dropped all pretense of being a loving couple, he didn't bother protecting Kate's dignity or reputation. "Carl, how dare you raise your voice at me? Are you still in love with that bitch?" Kate shrieked. Willow immediately knew Kate was referring to her biological mother. "You'd better watch what you say, Kate," Willow warned. Even though she didn't even know what her biological mother looked like, she wasn't going to let Kate insult her. Meanwhile, after hearing this exchange, the crowd became certain that Willow wasn't Kate's biological daughter. "So what if I insulted her? Willow, what can you do about it? Your biological mother is nothing but a fucking whore," Kate shouted. Willow ground her teeth in fury. She even wanted to slap Kate, but she knew that if she did, she would be criticized by others for raising her hand against an elder of the family. Alas, she had no choice but to rein in her anger. Willow had long since felt disappointed in Kate and the Stewarts. Carl was the only one who treated her well. The others never treated her like family. This was something she had come to terms with a long time ago. Thus, she'd already made up her mind that no matter who Caspian was, she was going to spend the rest of her life with him. He was the only one who treated her with sincerity. Nevertheless, Willow was still rather hopeful about Caspian's identity. All women would love the idea of having a hero for a husband. Unsurprisingly, the crowd began to make comments again. "I can't believe Willow, the CEO of Southlake Corporation, isn't Kate's biological daughter. That's indeed shocking news. If not for the current situation, this would surely be front page news." Marilyn said, "Everyone, kindly allow me to say a few words. It no longer matters whether or not Willow is the biological child of my daughter-in-law, Kate. She has cut off all ties with the Stewart family long ago. She's no longer related to us in any way." She took a deep breath before continuing. "Ever since Caspian married Willow, we, the Stewarts, have not been able to have a single day of peace. Caspian even wants to seize our family assets. Both Caspian and Willow are no longer related to the Stewarts. All they care about is money, and our family refuses to have anything to do with people like them." Stunned by Marilyn's declaration, the crowd began to rebuke Willow yet again. We finally see this side of the most beautiful woman in Southlake City. It's such a shame that she married such a vicious man. The Stewarts are so unfortunate. Their daughter was bewitched by a man. They won't be losing anything by cutting off all ties with her. Willow didn't know how to refute these people, but Sylvia couldn't stand hearing such insults anymore. "Shut up, all of you. How dare you run your mouths? Do you want to get arrested?" Sylvia hollered. Chapter 504 Caspian arrives. Initially, Sylvia didn't want to get involved in the verbal sparring. She was waiting for Caspian to arrive, knowing that he would shut these people up. However, even after some time had passed, Caspian was nowhere to be seen. The crowd was going so far as to insult him. Naturally, Sylvia couldn't ignore that. She would never let anyone insult him, the Mediterranean god of war. Thanks to her outburst, the crowd clammed up, too afraid to continue. Nevertheless, they were puzzled. Why would Sylvia, a general officer, help Willow? From this moment onward, we, the Stewart family, no longer have anything to do with Willow and Caspian. Marilyn continued to declare, domineering as ever. Even though she didn't raise her voice, the crowd had fallen silent earlier, so everyone heard her. Sylvia heard Marilyn loud and clear, of course, but she couldn't be bothered to deal with Marilyn. She had just spotted the military vehicle that Caspian was in. "Look over there! Take a look at who's coming!" Sylvia purposely shouted. Upon hearing her, the crowd turned to look. They saw an unassuming SUV driving down the street, but it was flanked by 10 tanks on its sides. There were another 6 tanks in front and 6 behind as well. This scene alone stunned everyone. However, they couldn't see the passenger inside the SUV yet, as it was in the very center. Caspian was riding in a modified SUV, and it was also being escorted by the tanks as an additional defense measure against any possible assassination attempts. He could have chosen to come over in a tank or even a helicopter, but since the war hadn't officially begun, he didn't feel the need to torture himself by riding in a stifling tank. After all, he was Lord Caspian, the Mediterranean god of war. He could do whatever he wanted. In the end, he chose an ordinary SUV. Yesterday, Sylvia informed him that Willow had deduced he was the Mediterranean god of war, so he had made up his mind to tell her the truth. Therefore, it didn't matter if the people of Southlake City found out about his true identity either. Caspian also knew that Willow would surely be out on the streets today, so he wanted to show her how powerful he was. Once she took in the impressive display, she wouldn't think he was lying when he told her who he really was. However, thanks to the surrounding tanks, the crowd couldn't see the person inside the SUV. Thus, they started to discuss among themselves again. Turns out the real big shot is only showing up now. Here we were, assuming that General Anderson's the big shot. I never thought someone even more powerful than him would show up. General Anderson only had a handful of tanks escorting him. It's obvious that he's not the most powerful figure around. That's right. This person has at least 20 tanks escorting him. Even General Anderson pales in comparison to him. He has to be the big shot. That's true. The big shots are always the last to arrive. General Anderson is already a senior general. Who could hold a higher rank than him? Why can't we see who it is yet? It's making me so nervous. Willow and Zoey were also dying to see who the big shot was. They fervently hoped that Caspian was the one sitting inside the SUV, but they dared not voice that out loud. If it turned out not to be him, the crowd would surely start mocking them again. As the SUV came closer, the crowd finally got to see what the passenger looked like. The man sitting in the back seat of the SUV was muscular and had a stoic expression. He was also dressed in a military uniform, but his proud and imposing manner was one that even John didn't possess. And when everyone finally saw his face, they were stupefied. It was a familiar face to them all. He was Caspian, the loser who was the Stewart family's matrilocal son-in-law. To their disbelief, there were 5 stars sewn onto the shoulder of Caspian's uniform. Even John only had 4 stars. Upon seeing him, Willow, Zoey, the Stewarts, and everyone present were thunderstruck. None of them expected that Caspian, the one everyone said was useless, was actually someone even more powerful than John. Although Willow and Zoey had already speculated that Caspian could be the Diaturanian god of war, they were still stunned by the sight of him. Earlier on, they had been humiliated by the crowd, and when Caspian didn't show up earlier, they had lost all hope. Neither one of them expected Caspian to arrive at such a crucial moment. The 5 stars sewn onto the shoulder of his uniform proved everything. Only a handful of people possessed such an identity. As Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war, he outranked 5-star military officers as well. However, Diaturan's military rank only went up to 5 stars. Thus, his identity as Lord Caspian, the Lord of Diadem Hall, remained a secret. Naturally, the honor bestowed upon Caspian wasn't without reason. When he was 20, he joined the battle along Diaturan's borders and accomplished remarkable feats on the battlefield. In just a few years, he not only made the enemy retreat, but he even reclaimed territories that the nation had lost in the past. He had taken part in over 100 battles and even saved the king of Diaturan before. 4 years ago, an internal conflict broke out at the king's residence in Dord City. At the time, the king sent a plea for help to Caspian, who was stationed at South Aridlands. After receiving the news, Caspian gathered his armored battalion and rushed over at once. They managed to wipe out the rebels and save the king. If Caspian hadn't done that, Diaturan would have surely descended into chaos. However, they couldn't let the citizens find out that the king had been held hostage and threatened. The news was kept a secret to avoid causing panic among the citizens. Thus, ordinary people had no idea that Caspian had been bestowed the title of Lord Caspian, the Lord of Diadem Hall. After all, considering how extraordinary that identity was, it was better that few were aware of it. Soon, the SUV Caspian was riding in was blocked from view again. "Wasn't that Caspian in the SUV just now?" Willow exclaimed. She had taken a peek earlier, and the man she saw in the SUV looked a lot like Caspian. Still, it had been too fleeting of a glance for her to be certain. "I think I saw Caspian too," Richard cried out. "That's impossible. How could Caspian be escorted around like that? There's no way he's some kind of big shot," Kate retorted with a derisive snort. She didn't believe that Caspian was a person of any importance in the military. He couldn't possibly be even more powerful than John. However, Willow had been living with Caspian for years now, and she even shared the same bed with him. Even though it had only been a quick glance, she was convinced it was Caspian she saw. She couldn't have mistaken him for someone else. It had to be him in the SUV. Chapter 505, The Brightest Star. Zoey had seen it too. Caspian was the man riding in the SUV. Now that Willow and Zoey knew Caspian was even more powerful than John, they were ecstatic. They didn't care how the others had tried to ridicule them anymore. It didn't matter if those people believed them or not. They were satisfied with the knowledge that they had been right about Caspian's identity. "Am I seeing things? I think I saw Caspian sitting in the SUV," Marilyn exclaimed in disbelief. She could hardly believe what she saw. Even though Caspian had previously proven himself to be no ordinary person, he couldn't possibly hold an even higher military rank than John, right? "I'm sure you were mistaken, Mom. The man just shares a small resemblance to Caspian. How could Caspian possibly receive such treatment?" Kate remarked with a chuckle. "That's right. It's definitely not Caspian. The man just looks like him," Alicia expressed her agreement. "Looks like we're all mistaken. The man just looks similar to Caspia," Marilyn said with a nod. Moments ago, the stewards openly declared that they had cut off all ties with Willow and Caspian. They even ruthlessly humiliated Willow in the process. Naturally, they desperately hoped that it wasn't Caspian in the SUV. It didn't matter who it was as long as it wasn't him. Just then, the convoy slowly came to a stop. The soldiers got out and formed neat rows on both sides of the road. The military vehicle that John was in also stopped. They were now waiting for Caspian's SUV to catch up to them. Desmond and his subordinates had also arrived and were waiting to welcome Caspian. Soon, the SUV stopped, and John came over to open the door. The spectators were flabbergasted to see John, a senior general, opening the door for the man inside the SUV. The people on both sides of the road hadn't gotten to see the man inside the SUV yet, so they craned their necks to get a good look at him now. Just the SUV alone had everyone waiting with bated breath. The door opened, and a muscular man in uniform with an imposing presence got out of the car. The moment the crowd saw who he was, their jaws dropped. It was Caspian, that good-for-nothing matrilocal son-in-law of the Stewart family. Everyone, including the Stewarts, Richard, and Nicholas, froze in shock when they saw Caspian. None of them expected Caspian to be an even more powerful figure than John. All along, they had called him a useless loser, and if they weren't witnessing this for themselves, they would never have believed it to be true. Miranda was also thunderstruck. Despite knowing that Caspian wasn't an ordinary person, she didn't expect him to possess such a shocking identity. Joey was similarly in disbelief. During the incident back on the Cliff of Death, a military unit had abruptly emerged to rescue Caspian. From that point onward, she began to suspect his identity. She knew he couldn't be just an ordinary citizen, but she didn't think he would be such a powerful figure either. Joey suddenly realized why the governor forbade her from getting involved in Caspian's matters. Was part of Caspian's doing all along. All the people who were killed were somehow connected to Caspian or Willow, died for going after those two. Meanwhile, the major players in Southlake City's business and political scenes also felt incredulous to see Caspian. No one expected a person of such importance to reside in an insignificant place like Southlake City. Some of them knew that Caspian was the commander of the investigative team, but no one ever thought he would hold such a powerful position. It was such a waste to have a 5-star military officer heading the investigative team. Still, after finding out Caspian's true identity, the major figures in Southlake City felt fearful. Once Caspian got out of the car, John, Desmond, and the soldiers got into formation and greeted him. The overwhelming display of authority took everyone's breath away. All was silent. No one dared to even speak. Upon seeing this, Willow was absolutely certain that Caspian was indeed the Diateranian god. "Look, Willow, see how mighty Caspian is," Zoey gushed. "Yeah, he's so impressive," Willow enthused like an infatuated fangirl. "Who would have thought that Caspian really is a powerful figure? I want a husband like him too. I envy you so much," Zoey declared as she stared dazedly at Caspian. He's been keeping this from me for so long. When he gets home, I'm going to teach him a lesson," Willow said. All kinds of emotions were coursing through her right now. "Willow, Caspian's a big shot, you know. Are you going to punish him?" Zoey asked with a chuckle. "I wouldn't dare to, not when I know who he is now," Willow giggled. "But he did keep this a secret from you this whole time. Don't you want to make him pay for that?" Zoey asked. "I'm not sure what I'll do yet. We'll talk about this some other time," Willow replied. In reality, she knew what she was going to do to him. She was going to make him satisfy her every need in bed until he ran dry. But that was too embarrassing to say at a time like this. Willow and Zoey spoke quietly, but due to how silent the place was, Caspian heard them anyway. After returning the soldiers' salutes, Caspian turned to Willow. Even though there was a sea of people on both sides of the road, Willow looked like the brightest star in the sky. Caspian zeroed in on her right away. Willow, who had been staring at Caspian's back the whole time, didn't expect him to suddenly turn around and look at her. As their loving gazes met, Willow felt a jolt. It was a strange feeling. Meanwhile, the awe in Willow's eyes tugged at Caspian's heart, making him swoon. But alas, he was the chief commander and couldn't possibly lose his composure because of his wife's beauty. He turned back around and started walking. Caspian didn't come here to be all lovey-dovey with Willow. He came to Southlake City to supervise the war. A major battle was about to start. He had a lot of things on his plate, so he couldn't waste any more time. He had to leave without even greeting Willow. John, Desmond, and the other military officers immediately followed Caspian. They were heading to Southlake City's coastline to observe the situation. Chapter 506 Brainless Fools. The Stewarts were gobsmacked to find that Caspian was even more powerful than a senior general. How could this be? Caspian really is a big shot, Marilyn stammered. Everyone knows how useless he is. How could he hold an even higher position than General Anderson? Alicia exclaimed nervously. I can't believe it. I must be seeing things, Kate cried out. Feeling thunderstruck, she couldn't bring herself to accept what was happening. Caspian, the son-in-law she had been disparaging all this while, turned out to be an important figure. His true identity had been kept a secret this whole time. Kate shook her head, thinking that she had merely been mistaken. However, the onlookers began to mock the Stewarts. "You Stewarts are all fools. You mistreated such a powerful son-in-law and even decided to cut off all ties with him. What an idiotic thing to do!" Just moments ago, Madam Stewart kept stressing that Willow no longer had any connection to the Stewart family. How laughable! Willow is the wife of a 5-star general. Do you think she cares about nobodies like the Stewarts? Even if they got on their knees and begged for forgiveness now, she wouldn't bother entertaining them. I wonder how the Stewarts feel now. I'm sure they're drowning in regret. Well, they chose to burn their bridges, so it's too late to turn things around. The Stewarts never had any respect for Caspian, but look at the way things are now. Caspian's even more powerful than they could ever imagine. The rumors were true, after all. Caspian is indeed no ordinary person. Here we were, thinking they were all lies. What do you expect from the Stewarts when an ignorant old woman's heading the family? Look what happened to the family. I distinctly remember the family having a much more prestigious standing when Madam Stewart's husband, the late Mr. Stewart, was still alive. I agree with you. The Stewarts have become nothing more than a bunch of pandering clowns. It was their own short-sightedness that led to their downfall today. If the Stewarts had maintained a relationship with Willow and treated Caspian better, they could have used their connection to him to establish themselves in Southlake City. In fact, they could have even become the most powerful family in the city. Alas, what a shame. They've missed out on such a wonderful opportunity. This would never have happened if the late Mr. Stewart was still around. This proves that you can't let an ignorant old woman be the head of the family. She'd bring the family down with her poor decisions. That's right, Kate is also such a fool. Her attitude toward Willow took a turn for the worse just because Southlake Corporation was bombed. She even exposed Willow's true parentage. Let's see what she's going to do now that she and Willow have completely fallen out. Alicia's just as much of a fool as the others. She has always had it out for Willow. She keeps thinking she's better than Willow in every way when in reality, she can't even hold a candle to Willow. The crowd's ridicule made the Stewarts feel deeply humiliated, but what they said was true. The Stewarts were indeed sorely regretting their actions now. They thought they had found a chance to criticize and humiliate Willow, but instead, they were the ones who became a laughingstock. On the other hand, Willow and Zoey didn't make any comments. The Stewarts were miserable enough as it was. It was never wise to kick someone when they were down. Unlike the Stewarts, the two women weren't unreasonable people. They thought it would be beneath them to kick someone when they were down. As for the surrounding onlookers, they were nothing more than sheep. They had all been on the Stewarts' side when the family ridiculed Willow. But now that they had seen how powerful Caspian was, they swiftly took Willow's side instead. Meanwhile, Marilyn was so incensed that she could barely stand straight. She had turned a little pale too. "Calm down, Grandma. Don't panic just yet. What if Caspian's just putting on an act? Don't let it get to you," Richard quickly said. The surrounding people who heard him were dumbfounded. What kind of a person would jump to that conclusion? There's no way it's just an act. Caspian is dressed in a military uniform, and even General Anderson opened the door for him, so how can it be an act? Marilyn refuted. When has the Diatoran army ever had a rank that's higher than a senior general? Even if someone like that does exist, why don't we know about him? I'm sure the authorities would have reported such information, Richard said. Upon hearing his argument, the Stewarts seemed enlightened. That's true. In the last few years, there hasn't been any news about the rise of a new important figure in the country, Nicholas declared. If we did have a general who's even more powerful than General Anderson, I'm sure the government would have made an official announcement about it. The press certainly wouldn't miss out on reporting such important news. Although Caspian is wearing a uniform with 5 stars on it, that doesn't prove his identity is real. It could really be just an act. You two brought up some very good points. Also, Caspian has always liked to pretend to be a big shot. He threatened me before and even said the most ruthless things, but I don't think we have to worry about anything. He can't possibly be a powerful figure. Marilyn spoke as she nodded in agreement. You're absolutely right. Caspian's my son-in-law. I know very well that he's completely useless. He just likes to brag. He even called himself Lord Caspian once. What a joke, Kate declared. That's right. He likes pretending to be a big shot. First, he called himself Lord Caspian, and now he's pretending to be a 5-star general, Alicia chimed in. Caspian has always been this way. Richard added with a sneer. The stewards are used to it. I don't think you guys need to pay any attention to him. I'm sure he's just pretending. How can someone like him be a big shot? Everyone knows that the appointment of high-ranking military officers is a major affair, Donald piped up. The government will definitely make an announcement each time they appoint one. But we have never heard of anyone being appointed for a position that's even higher than a general officer, right? Caspian's definitely putting on an act. He's just pretending to be a big shot to make himself feel good. Who knows? He might even pretend to be the king of Diatoran someday. The onlookers were stupefied. They couldn't believe that the stewards genuinely suspected Caspian of putting on an act. Who would dare to pretend to be someone even more powerful than a senior general? Unable to bear with it anymore, they immediately started making stinging remarks about the stewards. There's got to be something wrong with the stewards' brains. The truth is right under their noses, but they refuse to believe that Caspian is someone important. I know, right? They've got to be kidding. They're just lying to themselves. Look at all the tanks! Even General Anderson saluted Caspian. How could he have arranged for such a grand procession if he wasn't a powerful figure? The Stewart family must be a bunch of fools. They're just saying those things because they can't accept finding out about Caspian's true identity. Richard and Nicholas are just as foolish. Look at all those military officers surrounding Caspian. How can it be an act? How is it even possible for someone to suspect him? They're all brainless. I can't take it anymore. I'm so fed up with them. Chapter 507 Regrets. After hearing what the crowd said, Richard, Nicholas, and the stewards had a look of realization. The comments made sense. It seemed unlikely that Caspian could pretend to be a big shot in a situation like this. They finally got the feeling that Caspian had to be a powerful figure. Isn't a senior general the highest military rank in Diatoran? Why does Caspian have 5 stars on his uniform? Marilyn asked anxiously. The crowd immediately gave their responses. It's not hard to figure that out. Maybe the king of Diatoran awarded him with a special rank. Either way, who would dare to pretend to be someone they're not on such an important occasion? They'd get themselves killed. Didn't you see what happened just now? General Anderson, a senior general himself, opened the car door for Caspian. All the soldiers stood in formation and saluted him. Do you think an ordinary person could receive such treatment? It's obvious that Caspian holds a higher rank than General Anderson. Richard, Nicholas, and the stewards couldn't find any flaws in the crowd's analysis, so they felt even more dread. Marilyn was consumed by regret. If she had known Caspian was a powerful figure, she would have done her best to curry favor with him. Who would have thought that the so-called loser would turn out to be a big shot? She abruptly recalled all the ways the stewards used to mock him. If they had treated him with a little more kindness, the family would have surely soared to impossible heights. Marilyn cursed herself for messing up the one in a million opportunity. If someone as powerful as him became part of the family, the stewards could certainly bask in glory. Plus, since he was their matrilocal son-in-law, plenty of people would try to butter them up too. The family would gain a great deal of prominence and influence in Southlake City. Even Kate was feeling nothing but regret. She could have had such a powerful son-in-law, but she had chased him out. If she could turn back time, she would have definitely done her best to get on Caspian's good side. Alas, it was too late for regrets. Alicia also sighed lamentably. She never expected Willow to have such an important figure for a husband, one who was even more powerful than a senior general. If she had someone like that backing her up, there was no doubt that everyone would try to ingratiate themselves with her. In fact, if she had been able to establish a good relationship with Caspian, she would have probably been able to do anything she wanted. Unfortunately, the family failed to see that Caspian had been hiding his true identity. They had been degrading Caspian and Willow all along, and it was too late now. Willow no longer had any ties with the Stewart family. Similarly, Desmond and all the other Stewarts were stewing in regret. But at the same time, they felt fearful. They had ridiculed Caspian more times than they could remember. Would he come after them at some point? Out of all the Stewarts, Carl was the only one who seemed fairly calm. He and Caspian had a decent relationship, and after learning of Caspian's true identity, he felt privileged to be related to him. Naturally, Carl wasn't interested in profiting off his relationship with Caspian. He simply thought that Caspian being a powerful figure was a guarantee that Willow would live a good life. As long as Willow was able to have a blissful, carefree life, Carl would have nothing to be worried about. Truth be told, Carl was extremely glad that he had been treating Caspian well all along. He didn't join the other stewards when they debased Caspian. After knowing that Caspian was an important figure, Richard and Nicholas both felt trepidation. They had offended such a powerful person. There was no way they could rest easy any longer. They were doomed if Caspian came after them. Noticing how pale the stewards, Richard, and Nicholas were now, the crowd began to mock them yet again. I bet you there's something wrong with the brains of everyone in the Stewart family. Don't you remember how grand Caspian and Willow's wedding was? How could Caspian have arranged all that if he was just an ordinary person? But still, they looked down on him. That's right. That was the grandest wedding in all of Southlake City. Anyone with half a brain could deduce that Caspian couldn't possibly be a nobody. He has to be a big shot. But what did the stewards do? They chose to cut off all ties with him and Willow. The wedding isn't the only evidence. Don't forget about the memorial service Caspian held for his adoptive mother. Tens of thousands of soldiers came to pay their respects. Why would they do that if he was merely an ordinary person? But even then, the stewards failed to realize who he was. I can't believe how dumb the stewards are. Caspian has proven just how powerful he is so many times now, but they simply refused to believe him. They even thought he was just pretending. What a bunch of dimwits. Everyone thought the stewards were a family of idiots. Just then, one of the onlookers remarked, "I'm sure the stewards didn't want things to turn out like this. You should stop mocking them. Guys, don't rub salt into their wounds. What if the stewards mend their relationship with Caspian someday? If that happens, we wouldn't dare to offend them. Since that's the case, you should watch what you say now." The onlooker merely gave his opinion in passing, but Marilyn took it to heart. It had given her hope. If she could somehow bury the hatchet with Caspian and he and Willow rejoined the Stewart family, the family would surely soar to new heights thanks to their relationship with him. When the time came, the Stewart family would become the top elite family in Southlake City, maybe even in all of Diatorin. Why are you guys just standing there? Hurry up and apologize to Willow. Make sure you get her forgiveness. Marilyn cried out in a rush as if she had found a lifeline. She noticed that Caspian, John, and the others had left. They were heading off to the coastline of Southlake City. It would be impossible for ordinary people like them to approach Caspian. However, if they managed to get Willow's forgiveness, Caspian would surely forgive them too. After all, Caspian had always gone along with Willow's decisions. Therefore, all they needed to do now was fix their relationship with Willow. If they wanted Caspian to let bygones be bygones, they had to convince Willow first. Even though the stewards were inept in every way, they were the experts when it came to currying favor and other sycophantic behavior. Thus, after hearing what Marilyn said, they all got the hint. The stewards rushed over to Willow, hoping that she could forgive and forget. "Willow, I was the one who raised you. How could I possibly bear to cut off all ties with you?" Kate hastily declared. "Even though we're not related by blood, we're still mother. And I wasn't myself just now. It was a temporary lapse of judgment. That's why I said those ridiculous things. Please don't take them to heart." Alicia also came forward and said with a sincere expression, "Willow, I've always thought you were the best cousin someone could ever ask for. You're so beautiful, and you're even the CEO of a company. If only I could be half as accomplished as you are." Chapter 508 Opportunistic Sheep. Willow never thought the stewards could be this shameless. They had already severed all ties with her, but now that the tides had changed, they were hastily trying to butter up to her again. Their actions repulsed her to no end. "All of you have made yourselves very clear just now," Willow snapped. "You declared that the Stewart family and I are no longer related in any way. Yet, now that you've found out Caspian's a powerful man, you're trying to mend our relationship again. You guys are the most shameless people I've ever met. Just the sight of you makes me sick." Kate and Alicia immediately felt embarrassed. "We weren't thinking straight just now, Willow. I know I was wrong. At the end of the day, we're still a family, so let's just forget about what we said, okay? You'll always be my wonderful granddaughter, the pride of our family. Please come back to us." "Forgive me for my folly," Marilyn said. For the sake of getting Willow's forgiveness, she was willing to forego all of her pride. As long as the Stewart family received Willow's forgiveness, it would be as good as getting Caspian's too. Once that happened, they would be able to fly up the ranks of society. So what was the big deal about humbling themselves now? Oh, shut up! You people have let me down enough times now. I no longer want anything to do with the Stewart family. I'm not a saint. I'm just an ordinary woman, and I'll never be able to forgive you, Willow declared ruthlessly. When I needed help, all you guys did was add insult to injury. I still remember the way you treated me. Willow had made her mind up, and nothing anyone said today would sway her. Don't make any rash decisions, Willow. Grandma has even apologized to you. So why are you still being so heartless? Everyone will think you're a cold-blooded woman, Alicia threatened. That's right, Willow. Everyone's looking at you right now. Your grandma is the head of the Stewart family, but she has chosen to humble herself and apologize to you, so you shouldn't be putting on airs now. That'll only give everyone a poor impression of you, Alicia's mother chimed in. However, Willow ignored their threats and retorted, would you guys be apologizing to me if Caspian wasn't a big shot? I already told you that Caspian's a powerful man, but none of you believed me then. You kept ridiculing me instead. But now that you found out he really isn't just an ordinary person, you're trying to butter me up. I'm disgusted by opportunistic sheep like you. Don't even bother trying to convince me to forgive you. It's never going to happen. Upon hearing her outburst, the Stewarts lowered their heads, feeling guilty and embarrassed. Willow, on behalf of the family, I hereby declare that our doors will forever be open to you and Caspian. You can come home to us anytime you want, Marilyn declared. Now that Southlake Corporation has been destroyed, I'll let you manage Stewart Group as long as you forgive us. If you want, you can even become the CEO of Stewart Group today. Marilyn was willing to make extreme sacrifices to get Willow's forgiveness. She knew that as long as the Stewart family buried the hatchet with Caspian, they would be able to get whatever they wanted. The value of Stewart Group paled in comparison to the family's future. I still have a branch office in Dord City. Besides, with how powerful Caspian is, do you think I care about your measly Stewart Group? You must be joking, Willow shot back. Marilyn and the Stewarts froze. Willow had made an excellent point. Caspian was even more powerful than John, and the couple also had a branch office in Dord City. Stewart Group was nothing by comparison. Let's go, Zoey, Willow said. She didn't want to waste any more of her time on the Stewarts. She couldn't even look at them without feeling nauseated. Okay, Zoey replied with a nod before taking Willow by the hand and walking off with her. Sylvia and Macy swiftly followed after them as well, with the rest of the armored soldiers in tow. It was their responsibility to keep Willow safe. The Stewarts immediately tried to go after Willow while calling out to her. Willow, you haven't forgiven us yet. You're a Stewart too, Willow. Don't forget about us. Don't go, Willow! However, the armored soldiers immediately stopped the Stewarts. Hold it right there, one of the armored soldiers barked. The Stewarts shuddered in fear and halted, too afraid to continue chasing Willow down. Willow's my daughter. I have something to say to her. How dare you stop me? Kate screeched in dissatisfaction. No one can approach Mrs. Lynch without permission. Off you go, the armored soldier said curtly. They were assigned to protect Willow, and during these troubled times, they would not let anyone approach Willow without her permission, not even the Stewart family. The Stewarts froze in place. At last, they finally realized that Willow was the wife of a powerful man. That explained why there was always a group of people following her around. Alas, they were fools for not realizing this sooner. They should have seen the signs earlier. Right now, the Stewarts were overwhelmed with regret. They never should have mocked Willow. Vigilant as ever, the armored soldiers quickly caught up to Willow while the Stewarts could only stand and watch as she left. Meanwhile, the spectators were amused by the Stewart family's failure to mend their relationship with Willow. They could tell that Willow wasn't going to forgive the Stewarts. Soon, the news regarding Caspian's true identity spread all over Southlake City. After learning of Caspian's identity, Miranda and Joey both developed an admiration for him. Willow and Zoey went back to Riverside Villa. After confirming Caspian's real identity, Willow felt at ease. She thought it was best if she just stayed in the villa. Caspian had a lot of things to handle right now, and she didn't want to cause more trouble for him. John and Caspian made their way to Southlake City's coastline. The soldiers were thrilled by the arrival of Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war himself. By the time Caspian was done with his inspections, the sky had darkened. According to the latest intel, the troops from Vedesia and Astronia had arrived near Nekros. They were currently engaged in negotiations for passage to Diatorian. Nekros was only a few hundred miles away from Diatorian. If Nekros allowed those troops to pass through its borders, Diatorian would be in danger. Sir, the enemy troops have arrived at Nekros. They'll soon be able to reach Southlake City. It'll be safer for you if you return to South Eredlands, John suggested anxiously. Don't fret. I want to head home and check on things, Caspian said. Sir, we're in the middle of a conflict right now. It's not safe here in Southlake City. Who knows how many enemy forces are currently hiding out in the city? We need you to supervise the battle at South Eredlands, John cried out. He didn't expect Caspian to head back to Riverside Villa at a time like this. Don't worry. Deputy Commander Hart is overseeing the situation at South Eredlands. I plan on staying in Southlake City to deal with any sudden emergencies. This is a crucial moment. I'm going to supervise the battle myself, Caspian replied. You can't do that, sir. What if someone ambushes you? Southlake City is brimming with danger. Many people know that you're here now. Someone will definitely try to assassinate you. John kept trying to change Caspian's mind. That's enough. Say nothing more. I've made up my mind. I'm Lord Caspian, the Diatorian god of war. I will never retreat, Caspian declared. Chapter 509 Wickedness runs in the family. Knowing that he couldn't change Caspian's mind, John relented and said helplessly, All right. In that case, I'll spend the night at the villa with you. Why would you stay at the villa? Didn't they arrange accommodations for you? Caspian asked with a frown. You're Lord Caspian and the chief commander. I'm obligated to watch out for your safety, John declared with conviction. No need. I have Sylvia, Macy, and the armored battalion with me. You don't have to worry about my safety. You should return to South Eredlands to supervise the battle situation there, Caspian instructed. Oh, all right. Make sure you keep yourself safe, sir. Truth be told, John didn't think it was all that appropriate for him to stay at Caspian's villa either. What if Caspian wanted to spend some alone time with Willow? John certainly didn't want to get in their way. Soon, John set off for South Eredlands, and Caspian returned to Riverside Villa with over 1,000 Special Forces soldiers in tow. The stewards trudged back to Stewart residence in despondence. I never thought Caspian would turn out to be a big shot. Why didn't we realize it sooner? Marilyn exclaimed, regretfully. Although Fabian had died at Caspian's hands, Marilyn had to force herself to forget about that. After all, Caspian was the Diatorian god of war. As long as they ingratiated themselves to him, they could soar to great heights. Don't be upset, Grandma, Alicia consoled her. Caspian did too good of a job hiding his real identity. We can't be blamed for not realizing it sooner. How can I not be upset? If our family had a good relationship with Caspian, who would dare to offend us? They'd be bowing at our feet instead. As long as we can mend our relationship with Willow, we'll be set for life, Marilyn said. Knowing what Caspian's like, he's never going to forgive us, not unless we win Willow over. But Willow is also disappointed in us, so we can't do anything, Donald said. Willow's so heartless. We're still her family. How can she not show us some respect? Alicia ranted. That's right. Now that she knows her husband is a big shot, she's turning her back on all of us. Even though I didn't give birth to her myself, I did raise her, Kate growled through gritted teeth. All the stewards resented Willow. I told you guys to stop ridiculing Willow and Caspian, but you guys refused to heed my words, Carl reminded. Well, look what that has led to. They refused to forgive all of you. Things wouldn't have turned out like this if you guys had only just treated them better in the past. What's the point of criticizing us now? Huh, Carl? Are you so happy that we now have to fawn over them? Marilyn snapped. I'm just telling the truth, Mom. What you guys did was wrong. But even now, you still don't realize your mistake. You're trying to blame Willow for this situation instead. Don't you feel even an ounce of remorse? Carl asked. What mistake? We didn't do anything wrong. It's all Caspian's fault. Why did he hide his identity? If he had just told us about his background sooner, we wouldn't have made life difficult for him. He's to blame for hiding his identity for no good reason, Marilyn retorted. Rendered speechless by the family's attitude, Carl couldn't be bothered to try and talk some sense into them anymore. This is partly your fault too, Carl. Willow's your daughter, and why also to blame for the fact that she has turned her back on the family? Look at how she has turned out. How dare she defy her family? Donald criticized. That's right. If you had raised Willow properly, she wouldn't have turned out like this, Marilyn added in agreement. Carl was exasperated. The Stewarts had said such mean and cruel things to Willow, and they were now shoving all the blame for the situation onto him. He didn't feel like arguing with them, so he kept quiet. It doesn't seem like Willow's going to forgive us, so we don't need to hold back either, Kate piped up. What do you mean by that, Kate? Willow doesn't care about us anymore, Donald said. She thinks she and Caspian can do whatever they want just because he's an important figure, right? Well, I've thought of a way to make her suffer, Kate declared viciously. What's your idea? Marilyn asked. Well, I think it's extremely likely that Caspian's the chief commander of South Eridlands, Kate said. Everyone was thunderstruck. Kate continued, right now, everyone in Southlake City resents the chief commander. If we let all of Diaterania know that Caspian's that cowardly chief commander, I'm sure many people will come forward to rebuke him. When the time comes, Caspian's reputation will be ruined, and Willow will also be the subject of everyone's contempt. After hearing what she said, everyone understood what she was suggesting. It has to be Caspian. It's not surprising that a loser like him made such a cowardly move. He must have called for the retreat of the maritime troops. That's right. He holds an even higher rank than General Anderson, so it can't be anyone else. I think you all have a point. It's definitely Caspian. Exactly. Caspian has always been a good-for-nothing. I wonder how he even got promoted to his position. So what if he's a big shot? Can he withstand the public outrage against him? The power of the people is not to be underestimated. We should make Caspian and Willow the target of the public's outrage. The Stewarts were thrilled. They had finally stumbled across a way to deal with Caspian and Willow. You're playing with fire here. Aren't you going to even stop and consider the consequences of your actions? Carl cried out anxiously. What's there for us to fear? Marilyn snorted. Considering who Caspian is, surely there's a valid reason why he made such a decision. You guys need to watch out, or you might get arrested for stirring up rumors, Carl advised. What a joke. No matter how powerful Caspian is, he wouldn't dare to get us arrested over something like this, Kate said. That's right. Since they're not going to forgive us anyway, we don't need to bother playing nice with them either, Alicia declared wickedly. Over at Riverside Villa, Willow and Zoey were in the living room watching television when they heard a commotion outside. When they stepped out to take a look, they saw a long line of tanks and armored vehicles filling up the road. They were ecstatic. It had to be Caspian who had come. At the very next moment, a sea of soldiers got off the vehicles and formed two neat rows on the sides of the road. Then, Caspian stepped out of an SUV. Willow was taken aback. She didn't expect Caspian to come home during such a critical time. She felt a stir in her heart. Sylvia, Macy, and the others saluted Caspian as he entered the villa's compound without saying anything. As he approached Willow, her breath got caught in her throat, and her body tensed up. They had only been apart for a few days, but for some reason, seeing him now made her emotional. Chapter 510 being all lovey-dovey again. Honey, Caspian called out as he approached Willow. Willow could barely contain her emotions. The one and only Diateranian god of war was standing in front of her right now. Still, she forced herself to stay calm as she asked, "The war's about to start, so why did you come back? Don't you need to supervise the battle?" "I wanted to see you," Caspian said softly. "Why didn't you tell me you're Lord Caspian, the Diateranian god of war? How much longer were you going to keep it from me?" Willow questioned. "I told you about it many times, but you never believed me." "I couldn't do anything about it," Caspian said with a shrug. Willow had no response to that. It was true, after all. Caspian had indeed informed her of his identity in the past, but she assumed he was just trying to brag and even mocked him for it. Well, it turned out that she was the fool. Caspian had been telling her the truth all along. "How was I supposed to believe that my husband's the Diateranian god of war? You should have tried harder to convince me. Maybe I would have believed you if you repeated it enough times," Willow retorted. "You know me. I've always kept a low profile, so why would I keep saying that I'm the Diateranian god of war?" Caspian said. "Why did you expose your identity today, then? Everyone knows who you are now," Willow said worriedly. Truth be told, she was quite concerned. Now that Caspian's identity was open knowledge, many people in Southlake City would start setting their sights on him. The war's about to begin, so I had no choice but to openly announce my identity, Caspian explained. What else have you been hiding from me? You might as well come clean today, Willow demanded. I'm not hiding anything else from you, except that other than being the Diatoranian god of war, I'm also the head of the 5 war gods of Diatoran, the chief commander overseeing Diatoran's troops in this war, and head of the Two Lakes area's investigative team. Since he had already exposed his identity, Caspian decided to fill Willow in on all of the ranks and positions he held. Willow and Zoey were stunned to hear of all the important positions he held. Although they had deduced he was the Diatoranian god of war, they didn't expect him to be the chief commander of this war. Are you really the chief commander? Willow exclaimed. Yeah, I am. John and the others are my subordinates, Caspian elaborated since he didn't feel the need to continue hiding this information. As soon as he replied, Zoey became so agitated that she nearly fainted. Willow quickly held her steady while asking anxiously, Are you all right, Zoey? I'm fine. I'm just overwhelmed and a little scared, Zoey answered. Her emotions had nearly gotten the best of her. Huh? Who scared you? Willow asked puzzledly. Caspian, of course. Who would have thought that he's the Diatoranian god of war? Zoey exclaimed. Why are you even more agitated than I am? Willow remarked exasperatedly. Despite being Caspian's wife, she didn't have such an extreme reaction to the news. On the other hand, Zoey was on the verge of fainting. You have such an incredible husband, Willow. I bet I'll be benefiting from it just by being friends with you. Let's see who would dare to bully me now, Zoey cried out excitedly. Didn't we already figure out that he's the Diatoranian god of war? Why are you still so excited now? Willow commented. Even though she was rather floored by the news too, she wasn't as overwhelmed as Zoey. That's true. We did figure out who he was, but we didn't think he'd be the head of the 5 war gods. That means he's only second to the king of Diatoran. How can I not be overwhelmed when I'm in the presence of someone this powerful? Zoey gushed. After hearing Zoey's explanation, it abruptly occurred to Willow just how powerful Caspian was. Never would she have predicted that he would be second to only the king of Diatoran. It was far too shocking of a revelation, but this time, Willow and Zoey both believed what Caspian said. The procession they saw earlier today had left too deep of an impression. There was no reason for them to not believe what he said. Considering what Caspian's identity was and what he was capable of, he wouldn't need to brag about himself. Only a fool would choose to not believe him now. Caspian, considering who you are, I'm sure you can have any woman you want. Even Jin seems like a good match for you, so why did you choose to marry me instead? I'm just an ordinary woman, Willow said, feeling self-conscious. Willow, I've already told you this before, I love you. No one else can replace you. Don't ever say such a thing again, or I'll be very upset, Caspian chided unhappily. Although he had constantly proved to Willow that he loved her, she continued to let this question plague her. Caspian wondered if all women acted this way. Did they need their partner to constantly remind them and prove to them that they loved them? I just can't figure out why you find me attractive, Willow said doubtfully. There are plenty of women who are far better than me. You even had to put up with so much mockery because you became the Stewart family's matrilocal son-in-law. The Stewarts had never shown you any respect. Even I feel like you never should have been put through all of that. She couldn't understand why Caspian chose to be with her. Everything about you is attractive to me, Caspian replied. Can you be a little more specific? Are you just trying to trick me into dropping the subject? Willow huffed. You're kind, you're beautiful, and you have a great figure, Caspian said with a chuckle. How am I beautiful? How is my figure great? Willow asked. In reality, she just wanted to hear Caspian singing her praises. She thoroughly enjoyed hearing compliments from him, so she wanted to hear more. Your skin is soft, your smile is gorgeous, and your eyes are soulful. You're beautiful in every way, Caspian said. He didn't expect Willow to enjoy compliments from him so much. Willow was grinning from ear to ear, but she wasn't satisfied yet. I want more details, Willow requested. You have such an amazing figure. You have curves in all the right places, and your legs go on for miles and miles. I can't keep my hands off that slender waist of yours. Caspian exhausted his repertoire of praise. What else? I want to hear more, Willow demanded. She was drunk on his praises and wanted him to keep going. "You're the most beautiful woman in Southlake City. Do you really need me to continue describing your beauty?" Caspian remarked. After eyeing her for a while, he continued, "You're soft in all the right places, especially the sensitive ones, and—" Willow blushed, and before Caspian could finish his sentence, she stomped her foot and cut him off. "Stop it, you perv! You're embarrassing me." She never thought he would start describing the more intimate parts of her body. Meanwhile, Zoey rolled her eyes. She had been forced to witness the dovey-dovey exchange between the couple. "Why are you two rubbing your relationship in my face? Huh? What did I do to deserve such torment? Just go to your room. You can say whatever you want and do whatever you want there," Zoey snapped.